Hi, I'm Robert. Thank you for joining me today at Sew It Like a Man. I know a lot of you are at home over the next 2 weeks because schools are closed and a lot of businesses are closed, and you're thinking, what are you going to do with all that time? Well, if you're a sewer or crafter, you probably don't have a problem filling up all that time like I do, but one of the things that I've been wanting to do is to clean out my closet, get rid of some clothes, donate them, or figure out something else to do with them. And I had a lot of t-shirts that don't fit me anymore. So I thought, well, rather than donate them, they're still in good quality, I wanted to use them. So I thought I would actually cut up one of my patterns and make new underwear out of it. So I'm going to take you through the process. I'm going to be using my boxer brief pattern, which is the most popular. I'm going to be adding a side seam to it, which is here. This is the completed product. So I'm going to be adding a side seam. The other thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding a rolled waistband instead of having the elastic on the outside. So I'll be adding some to the top of the pattern. I also lengthened the legs about 1 inch. And so I'm going to be taking you through all of that pattern process. One additional thing that I did use in this process was a cover stitch machine. A lot of you have been asking me why I use a zigzag machine. Well, I'm going to be doing another video about all the machines that I use and why. But it does make it a little bit nicer if you have a cover stitch machine, but I understand that not a lot of you do have a cover stitch machine. So that's one of the reasons why I use a zigzag. But in this case, I used a cover stitch machine. Now, I'm not going to be walking you through the process except for the pattern drafting, so I'm going to speed up the process while I sit here and sew on my 2 machines. So hopefully you'll just enjoy this as a video that you can watch, and maybe you can take one of the patterns and cut it up and make it out of your own clothes to actually reuse those old clothes that you have. So let's get to it. Okay, so I have everything that I need. I've got the 2 t-shirts that I'm actually going to use. I've got some extra paper here. If you have a large piece of paper to put over the pattern for altering it, that's great, but I've just got some extra copy paper here that I'm going to use. And I have the pattern, my tape, ruler, marking pen, my paper scissors, and I'm ready to go. So I can actually move the t-shirts out of the way for the time being. And before I get started, I want to do some alterations to the large pattern piece. Now this piece here is the main body, and we're going to need to cut this up at least once in order to get it to fit onto the t-shirt. And I'll explain to that once we get to the cutting. I'll show you why. So this is actually too wide for the t-shirt. If your t-shirt is wide enough to get your pattern on, you don't need to cut it. The width of this pattern piece, I'm doing a medium, is too wide for my small t-shirt. So I'm gonna have to actually slash here in the pattern to actually get a side seam. That's all I'm gonna really do. But there are some alterations I wanna do to this really quickly before I actually slash it. Normally when I do the elastic in the videos, and the way the elastic is done for this boxer brief pattern is I actually just sew the elastic right on top of the fabric, which means that this edge is the finished edge at the waist. But in this video, for the underwear that I'm making, I want to actually roll the elastic underneath, but I don't want to lose this length. So I'm going to be using 1 inch elastic. So I'm going to actually add 1 inch up here to the waist, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that in just a sec. The other thing that I want to do is that I actually want to add 1 inch of length to the length on the leg, because I feel like for me this is a little bit too short, and I know that I have gotten some of you messaging me about how to change the length. So I'm going to show you how to do that really quickly. I'm only going to add 1 inch. If you want to add more, my suggestion is not to go beyond 2 inches, because then you get into an issue with angles here, and we want to keep this angle here at the back and front crotch here at pretty much right angles. That's so they sew well together when you sew them. Okay, so let's do this waist first, and what I'm going to do is I'll just take some of my paper. I'm going to cut this in half. And I'm really just going to actually tape it to the pattern underneath, and it doesn't need to be perfect in the beginning. We'll clean all of it up. Just tape it in a couple of spots. And then the other piece can go here. And I'm going to use this other piece, cut that off, and use for the front pouch, because I've also got to my front pouch, which is right here. I also need to lengthen the front pouch. Let me actually tape this up here, make sure that's all secure. So I'll just cut this off real quick, and then I can tape this to the pouch. Now all I need to do, I'm going to do the front pouch first since it's a straight line. Mark it 1 inch above the pattern, and then I will correct for my line here, and I'm going to follow. Now notice that this line, if I follow this line, kind of goes up here angled. We don't really kind of want to do that because it will make this part up here at the top of here smaller. We could stretch it back into the suit, but we just want to make everything really straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it perpendicular from this point. And when you cut this, we can just cut it and kind of curve it a little bit as you're cutting the fabric out. So let's actually do the main body here. We have the same situation here. Actually, let's do the 1 inch. I'm going to do the 1 inch all the way across. And if you have a see-through ruler, it's really helpful. I can just mark every little way right around. And you've got this little slight curve. Don't forget that part. All the way around. The center back is easy. That's going to be still going to be on a fold. Once we get to the t-shirt, we'll actually use one of the side seams of the t-shirt as the fold. So now again, just like we had with the front pouch, we have an angle. If we follow this up, it will actually make this smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make that line perpendicular. All right, and then we can actually just cut along our lines. And then once you're done cutting, looks like I could probably tape a little bit better to keep it secure. You want to tape underneath the pattern too so that it doesn't move around on you. So I'm going to do that real quick in just a couple of spots. Now I'm kind of trying to do this fast so the video doesn't last too long. I'm going to set this aside. Then I'll cut this too. Now, of course, you don't have to use your old t-shirts to do this, and you can use fabric, but I went through my old t-shirts and I thought, well, I know I could donate them, but I needed new underwear anyways, and I thought, well, I'll just use my old t-shirts and make some new underwear. Recycle, reuse, renew. Okay, so now that we've got the waistband lengthened, and actually this will actually end up being rolled under, so the length of the boxer, the height on the waist will remain the same. So I'm done with the pouch, so I can set that aside. Now I'm actually going to lengthen the leg opening by 1 inch as well. And I'm going to do the same thing with paper. I'm going to cut a couple of these. We don't need the whole width, so I can just cut the length in half. And then I'm going to tape these. Is 2 going to be enough? I might better do another one. So I'll start here. And then just get this taped. All right, I think 2 of them was enough. And then we'll do this. So lengthening the leg opening can be a little bit trickier than lengthening the waist on this particular pattern, mainly because I have this curve at the center back and there's no, we don't have a gusset on this one because the front pouch curves under the crotch area to bring it all the way back around to the front. Again, this goes this way. I know it's the other way, but my notch is here. So what I'm going to do the same thing. First, I'm going to actually mark the 1 inch all the way around. And then what we'll have to do on each end is we'll have to correct for the angles of the seam, because we want really our angles to be at right angles for where the seams are sewn together. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'll just go ahead and continue this line. I'll show you. Well, this one actually looks like it's actually at a pretty good right angle, so that one looks pretty good. But what happens if I do this, if I continue this curve down here, I'll just put a mark, it doesn't really make a right angle. So what I like to do is on this here, if I follow this line here, line up the line here where my original line was, which is fairly straight, with one of the straight lines on my ruler right here for about 1 inch, and then I draw that line. Then I'll keep this here at a right angle. And that's what you want when you're sewing. I don't know if you can see it sewing, because you want the 2 right angles to line up. And you can't see that. I'm gonna cut it here in just a minute so you can see that, so that you don't have any pointies going out, so that when you fold it up to hem it, everything remains nice and flat. So now 1 inch may not seem like a lot in the length. Let's tape this down. But actually an inch on the leg is actually quite a bit of an amount to add to the length. So sometimes you just kind of have to test things out a little bit. So it doesn't work for one pair, then maybe do a little bit more or do a little bit less. All right, so now I have added the amount to the waist for the rolled over waistband, and I've added my length for my leg. So now what I can start working on is I can actually work on slashing, and I kind of want to do this half and half. So I want my slash line on the body of the boxer to be right in the middle. So now remember that the width of your front pouch is also part of the total length of your waist. So what I'm going to do is, and it actually goes this way, because this is actually, I'll mark this here so you can see it. This is actually where my notch is. So that's where I kind of need to line it up to. So those both, it's a tiny bit off. Okay, I might just take a sliver off of that. It's a little bit off there. That's better. So I have a 1/4 inch on each of these sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark that, and I'm going to get, what I'm going to do is I want to get the width, the total length. I'll lay that on top of each other, and then we're going to measure right around, and remember we have another 1/4 inch here. We want the width without the seam allowances. So I can use my see-through, measure this, right? And right, it should be about 15 and a half. So then I can measure up here 7 and a half. And that's where my slash line will be. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. What's my half here? And I'm going to round it up to 17 for the opening. So half of 17 is 8 and a half. So I'll mark where 8 and a half, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I've got my lines. Now, one of the things we also need to think about is that we also need right angles here. So I'm going to correct this before I cut. So these angles look okay, but this angle down here doesn't look too perfect. So we have a choice. We can actually take away or we could add. And I think I'm going to see where my angle is, and I can maybe take a little bit away on this curve. And then curve back into that right angle. And I'm just kind of curving this around. Now, that may give us a little problem when we hem, but remember, this is stretch, and we can actually pull on that fabric while we hem it, which will actually hold to the leg a little bit better. So I'm going to cut this now. Oops. And our angles actually look pretty good here and here. So when we sew this together, we should look okay. There won't be any poking out there. So now that I've slashed this, I actually have to put my seam allowances in. Is this going to be tall enough? Barely, I think. So I got to put seam allowances here. So I'm adding paper. Whatever you do, however you cut this up to fit, if you're using garments and you want to cut your garments up to, or how you're going to cut your pattern up rather, just make sure wherever you cut, you'll need to add back in seam allowances, and most overlocks are 1/4 inch, so that's why I add 1/4 inch, and of course I've got 1/4 inch around all the other pattern perimeters. Okay, so I'm going to line this up. Mark off my seam allowance. And I'm probably going to tape this a little bit better on the back. All right. And once I cut this off, we'll actually be ready to go to our t-shirts and cut out. Okay, so now I've got my front, my back, and my front pouch. All right. So of course you can cut this differently. You can cut it any way you want. Maybe you want a big side panel. You could have measured here and here and made one big side panel, added another piece of fabric a little bit smaller, and done a side pocket. However you want to cut it up, but you want to be cutting it so it fits the size of your t-shirt. Okay, so now we're ready to start working with the t-shirt and the pattern. So I've got my t-shirt here, but I want to show you, if you lay it flat, as flat as you can, on some t-shirts, you get this happening. This is actually the side seams, how it kind of rolls over. That means it's been cut off grain at one portion of the garment. But we want to utilize one of these side seams for the center back seam cut on fold. So what I'm going to do is, even if you try to flatten this on that side seam and then flatten the rest of it out, then you get all of this rippling or roping that happens, and you won't be able to get a good cut. Okay, because what I want to do is this, right? And we won't be able to lay it flat enough to get a good cut. So what I'm going to do, is I'm actually going to cut the other side seam to see if I can release that. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut this up. I'm gasping, this is one of my favorite colors. But I'm just going to cut up that other side seam all the way through the sleeve, and we won't need those. You could probably save those for something else. And now go to the other side seam. And since that has been released, everything on the other side, and we just see it's kind of come up here, and sometimes when they cut these in the factories large, things get stretched out, or they're sewing in one direction and it gets stretched in one direction to the other. So now I will be able to put my center back piece here right on that seam line, and I've got all this extra other fabric that I can be working with. Make sure you can see that in the camera. Check here, yeah, up here. So I'm right here at the underarm, and I'm gonna move this down a little bit. On your shirt, if you have a lot of roping or twisting, make sure that the underside, you're gonna get that cut. All right, and I'm gonna put my weights here. Now, I do have this front. I can't get the front out. You could try if you're, depending on where you lay it out, you could move this down a little bit. It looks like I might be able to do something here that's kind of cutting it a little bit close. But what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to do the front panel here, the other out of the other shirt. And I can get my two, I need to cut 4 of these. I could actually do this here. If I do a little bit click here and here, could I do it there? Here, or I can do one in the purple and then one, I have another green t-shirt. So I'm actually going to see if I can get both of these, but I'm gonna cut one at a time. So, move this up. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Okay, so this is the piece I just cut, and if we fold it out, right there, so there's my back piece, and I have the center seam here. Now, if you want to have a center seam, you can also add the center seam here with the seam allowance. If you just want to put it in the middle of the shirt and have a seam allowance, you'll need to add the seam allowance here 1/4 inch if you're going to have 2 different colors, depending on how you're going to utilize that, your t-shirts. So let's set this aside, and let's see what I can get out of this, how I can get this front pouch here. Just make sure everything, so I'm going to move this up because I've got plenty of this fabric up here. Make sure that I'm in a good spot here. Right. And then of course, don't forget your notch if you need it. I just do a little pimple here just to let me know that's where it was. Okay, so there's one. Now I like to cut 4 because I like to line it. There's one. Can I get this other one here? If I turn it here, what if I lower this? It looks like I can. Maybe not. If I do it this way, I can get it out of there, and I'm down here. Now, of course, I could do 2 out of this purple and 2 out of the green. But I kind of want both, all the fronts to be purple. All right, so there's that one. Whoops. Get that cut off. And then there's the other pair. So now there is some extra fabric here You can save it, toss it. I'm probably gonna save some of this top part, and I'll probably toss the other part, or use it as scraps for testing out machines and things like that. All right, so now I just have my front panel, and I'm probably gonna have to cut up one of these side seams as well. I could just put it like that, but then I'm wasting all this other fabric, so I'm gonna actually cut this up so I can get it laid flat. Cut this side seam so I can get it laid flat, so that I can actually use the other part. Maybe I have another shirt. I know that I can get two front pouches out of whatever is left over for sure on this color. Okay, so let's lay this, get this laid out flat, and I'm using this seam line again to make sure everything is kind of flat. Okay. Now the question is, where do I want to cut this? Up high, like this. Remember, this isn't, I don't need a fold, so do it like this, or over here, this way. I think I'm gonna cut it up way up high this way. Remember, this is kind of at an angle. I didn't redraw my grain line in there, but I think it's about angled like this. Okay, so that's how I'm gonna cut. And then I'll have this extra here for another pair. Don't forget this notch, it matches with the notch on your front pouch. All right. And then I've got all this extra, I'm gonna save that. Okay, so now just to review, I have my back piece that is going to be sewn to the front panel, and then my front pouches are going to be sewn to that. Now, one of the things you probably I just want to call out for you to remember is that all of these, because we are seeing these on the face side, you'll have to make sure that you're matching the wrong side together to sew these. And I'm not going to show close-ups of the sewing, so you'll just see me sewing, and I'll speed that part up because I think there's another video of actually how to sew everything together. Usually I start with the front pouches, I sew all those together, turn right side out, and then what I would do, sew these seams together, sew these side seams together, and then the pouch. Or I might sew the pouch to the front and then the front to the side seams. Let's see how I decided to do this. I want to thank you for following along with me today. Check out all the other videos I have for my other products at sewitlikeaman.com. Until next time.